Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a review for Goodbye Perfect by Sara Barnard. This is a young adult contemporary novel about a girl whose 15-year-old best friend has run away with their teacher. Eden, the main character, is still in touch with her best friend as the police are looking for her, and throughout the story deals with the conflict of whether or not she should tell everyone where Bonnie is hiding. I'd heard a number of people on BookTube talk about this book. I don't remember specifically who right now, but I do remember that it's gotten fairly positive reviews. And I really did enjoy this. I gave it 3 stars because I had some issues with mostly the writing style, but overall, I thought the story was very entertaining. I was very invested all the way through, and if this is the kind of book you enjoy, if you like YA contemporaries that are a little bit more issue-driven, I do highly recommend giving this a try. My biggest issue with this book was the writing style and the narration style. It's told in first person, present tense, which I often have struggled with. Eden has a very immature voice, and she's talking almost directly to the reader at points. She'll say things like, I guess you're wondering who I am. My name is Eden McKinley, and I'm 16 years old. And I really don't like stories that are written like that. I do prefer more of a wall between the reader and the characters, and I find that that's something I struggle with a lot in first-person present tense stories. It's essentially the same issue I had with Colleen Hoover's book that I read. I just find it very irritating, and I'd rather have a little bit more distance. I'd rather hear these things as they come up within the story rather than being told directly by the main character. But if this is the kind of writing style that you personally enjoy, I think this is a great book. That was my major issue. I had a few others, but overall, that was the one thing that really knocked this from a 4-star down to a 3-star for me. Because I think maybe that if this had been in first person past tense, I think maybe this would have been 4 stars. And going along with that, at the beginning, there were lots of lists describing the characters. She'd be like, oh, this is my boyfriend. So-and-so, I've already forgotten his name. I'm not very good with names. That's not really commentary on this book. That's just me personally being terrible at remembering names. But she'd just have a list of information about him. She'd have a list of information about her best friend or herself, and I found that very irritating. It is kind of the same sort of thing as the first person present tense issues I had, but especially I don't see that very much even with books that are told in that kind of style, and it just felt very lazy. I didn't like that when I was a teenager either. It's just one of those things that feels very lazy and very obvious in the story. I don't want to be told things directly. I want them to come naturally through the story, and this book definitely didn't do that. A small thing, there were a lot of text messages in this book, which I was fine with. I do tend to like that in books. I grew up in a time when Laura Miracle was writing TTYL and TTFN and all those books, so those were my childhood, and I'm kind of down with this. But she did switch the format of the texting, which irritated me. Most of the texting was in texting bubbles, which I really liked. I thought that was a very clear and concise way to have the text, and it was very easy to read. But sometimes the text would be bolded within just the regular narration, and I didn't like that. It was kind of annoying, and just having both of them especially didn't work well for me. It's a small thing. It didn't bug me too much, but it was something that I really noticed and didn't like. In addition to that, some of the newspaper articles that were in here, because there are newspaper articles about her friend's disappearance, it felt really, really fake to me. It would be a typical newspaper article. It wasn't anywhere sleazy. It would be just a standard news article. And they'd refer to the teacher as oh, this creepy teacher, this sick pervert. And newspapers aren't really going to do that. They might find a quote from someone who's saying that and run that quote. But within the text of the article, they themselves aren't going to call the teacher a sick pervert or creepy or anything like that. It felt very fake. It's one of those things that she very easily could have just Googled a similar article and used that as a template, and she clearly didn't, and that bugged me. It's something that always bugs me in books like this. That's something that does really get on my nerves, is when the newspaper articles don't feel like real newspaper articles. So I really didn't like that. If you're going to include newspaper articles in a book, I want them to feel real, because when they feel fake, that just completely takes me out of the world of the story. And my last major issue was that everything in this book felt so incredibly obvious. Maybe that's me looking at this as an adult, but I do think that even as a teen, I would have found this book incredibly obvious. At one point, Eden looks up grooming, and she looks up the definition of grooming and all the symptoms, and has this whole internal discussion with herself about whether or not she believes that Bonnie is being groomed by the teacher. She has a fight with her older sister about her being so judgmental, and then her older sister directly connects it to Bonnie and is like, I'm talking about Bonnie too here, not just the other situation we were arguing about. And it was just everything. Like, I could list a dozen examples of it. Just everything felt like so obvious and in your face. And I do think this book would have worked better and felt like it had more depth if there was some subtlety there. Not everything needs to be thrown in your face all the time. I can figure it out for myself. Most readers can figure it out for themselves. And I felt like she was just trying too hard to get her points across, and she was worried that if she was any more subtle, people would have missed it. And I really think that they wouldn't have. It was kind of like just detrimental to like the themes she was discussing. I don't want the themes to be discussed blatantly for me. I can figure them out for myself. I'd prefer just more subtlety in the book, and I do think it was really lacking that a lot. But I was invested in this story for all its flaws. I read this in about 3 hours. It was like one sitting, and part of that was because I was afraid that if I ever put it down, I would lose my momentum, and then it'd take me like 4 days to finish it. But mostly it was just because I was invested in the story. I was interested. I wanted to see how it ended. I didn't think the ending was particularly great, but I loved the ride getting there, and it was just so wonderfully fun. And I do really enjoy contemporaries like this. I had a lot of issues that kind of just barely kept this from being 4 stars for me, but I still found it really enjoyable. And I think if you like that more first person present tense, the character is almost talking to the reader, I think if you like that kind of thing, you would definitely really enjoy this book. I think if you like sort of Colleen Hoover's style of writing, you would probably like this book a lot more than me. I'm just not personally a fan of that, so that did kind of keep it down a star. But I can see why this has gotten pretty wonderful reviews, and I do think this is the book that I'd recommend for teenagers. I think it deals with the issue of the girl running away with her teacher very well. I had no issues with the way it was dealt with, and overall just really enjoyable. I'm glad I picked it up. It wasn't everything I wanted it to be, but still pretty worthwhile in my opinion. Let me know down below if you read Goodbye Perfect and what you thought of it if you did. I do think it's one that, despite my 3-star rating, I think I could easily recommend it to other people who maybe prefer that writing style more than I do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all again soon.